everyone, it's Linda from LyndaCreates, and I'm excited to share this project. It's a stitched double hoop Christmas project that is so much fun to do. It's really easy. I'll show you how to do it, but I'm excited to share how I turned this into this. And in the middle there, I've hung a vintage Christmas ornament, and it's really simple. Let's get into it. This project is going to be fun in that I'm using two different hoops. One is a 4-inch and one is an 8-inch. I am using, well, some embroidery floss, and I thrifted this interesting ribbon. I guess they use it as yarn as well. It feels, I don't even know how to explain it. It's very shiny, it's variegated. It's about 1/8 of an inch wide. I'm also using a couple of different needles, but I want to show, okay, so I'm also using some beads, 3 different sizes, but I'll show you what I did with them here. A marking pen, it's water soluble, so it's a fabric for embroidery. And the only other thing I need now is the background, which I am using a 100% cotton napkin. I was going to use different types of fabric, but I needed it a little stiffer. So this cotton fabric, it says it's from World Market, so it's not vintage, but I did thrift it, so it'll be interesting. And I've ironed it, and you can still see the creases, so I can't get rid of that, unfortunately, yet, until I stretch it. And then the only other thing I'm using is my pattern, which I printed out, but I'll show you what I'm going to do with it. You definitely need to print this out before you start on this project. So let me set everything aside and I will show you how to start. So I'm starting off with the napkin backing, my 2 hoops, and my pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the back side of my napkin. You can see the seam here facing towards me, so kind of backwards. I'm going to put my pattern behind it, and I want to give some little bit of space up here and here. I don't need, you can do it in the center of your napkin, but I'm always thrifty, so I want to save some part of the napkin that I'm not going to use for another project. And you want to loosen your smaller hoop, the 4-inch hoop, as loose as possible without it coming undone. And then we're going to lift that up. I have the screw as loose as possible. And now it's not the tightest, but I have to be careful about these wrinkles on the side. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. So I'm going to tighten it slightly so it stays in place. So it's not the tightest. It's not the tightest it's going to be, but it's also not going to fall off. Okay, that's step 1. Now we're going to turn this over. And step 2, you could kind of see all the ripples on the side. We're going to try to straighten that out just a bit. And it just comes from stretching it a little bit. And don't worry about the little ripple where the screw part is. We'll take care of that. I'm going to take the larger one and loosen it as loose as I can go. I'm going to place that down here. Okay, so you loosen this as loose as it can go without falling off. And we're going to lay it on top, aligning the top screws. And I'm going to push it down. Now we should have about 1 inch. Okay, so that's about right. Okay, so now I'm going to start tightening this. When you get it about halfway, because with 2 of them, you're going to have a lot of wrinkles that you want to do. So you don't want to tighten this too much. And what you're going to do is work your way around and just pulling releases some of the wrinkles. Okay, so you want, it's kind of something you feel. You want to make sure it's tight enough that it's not going to pop off, but loose enough that you can keep adjusting. So see this wrinkle right here? If you pull along the sides, pull down, pull sideways, and it's really just kind of moving everything around. And this is another reason why you want to use something a little stiffer like this napkin. And again, it's 100% cotton, but it is a, oh, you could see that wrinkle right there. And just keep working it there. Got that out. You do need a little bit stiffer fabric. You can't have something too flimsy. What I'm trying to do is get this wrinkle line a little straighter. And as you're tightening it, you can also go back here and tighten this. Now I know this is a little bit harder to do later, but you didn't want to do it at the beginning because the wrinkles will be a little different than if you tightened it really tight at the beginning to get that nice and tight. Okay, now go back here, and I'm just working my way around. When you're getting close to it being the way you want, if you have a screwdriver type turn, I happen to have my pliers out. The hoops are going to remain as part of this project, so just be aware that whatever hoops you use will stay with the project. Okay, so there you can see we have the outer edge, and some of these wrinkles will disappear as you stitch. I'm going to cut off some of this. I have, you can see a lot of extra fabric down here, so I'm going to trim that off right now. I trimmed it out, and I would say probably if you have a piece of fabric that you're working with, I would say start with about a 17 or 18 inch square piece of fabric if you're using an 8-inch hoop. Let me confirm. Yes, an 8-inch hoop. So 17 or 18 inches to start if you're going to start that way. So, okay. Now, the next thing we are going to do is transfer the pattern. And now you can see why it has this look to it. So I'm going to make sure and take my paper scissors, and I'm going to cut on the inside of the dark circle. You don't need to make it exact. On here, you want to cut on the outside of the circle. And this is why you need to have the water erasable pen, because you're not taking this out of the hoop again, so you need to make sure it all fits. Now what you could do is cut right here. Okay. So it is going to go under here. Now if this is too tight, okay, you can see it's a little too tight, you can always trim away a little bit more. I'm just cutting a slight bit. And unless you put the hoops on exactly right, it's going to vary a little bit. So you just cut the pattern until you get it where you want it. And again, it has to be on the back side, remember. And you press it down there. And you can see where it's coming up here. So you want the top to be between the two, where the post is. And then you want this at the bottom. Could be off-centered slightly, but you can see where your pattern is going to be. So now we're just going to trace it. Okay. So let me explain too. On my pattern, you could see the wagon wheel design. I did the circle, but you don't need to. You just, oops, straight, but you just need to do the lines out. You don't need to do this round circle. Okay. And I'm leaving my hand behind it so that the pattern stays really close to the fabric. Okay, another thing I need to explain too about my pattern as I'm working it is that I also have these round circles here. Can you see that right there? That's going to be one of my beads. So it's not going to be stitched. So I'm not going to draw that circle in. Also, a couple things too is the leaf is going to go behind these flowers, so you can draw them all the way through if you want. You don't need to. I'm kind of hesitant about this leaf down here. It is a little low, so it might I'm going to turn it this way slightly. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a dot where the berries are going to be. I don't need to do a whole bunch of the side leaves because I know where I want them to go. So one more leaf, forgot this leaf. So now I'm going to remove the paper and definitely keep that nearby for reference. Kind of do one more check to see that your fabric's nice and tight. Yeah, can't turn it anymore. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start stitching. Actually, what I want to do is show you how I made the berries. Let me show you. I'm showing you on a wooden bead that is about 7/16 diameter. It has a large hole. That was the thing that I was looking for. Was it needed to be small enough, but a large enough hole in the center. And I have a small but sharp needle, smaller than I would normally use, but this is 6 strands of floss. So I'm going to wrap the bead. Okay, let me show you. I'm going to stick the needle in there and bring it up to where I have just a little tail sticking out. And I'm going to hold it up here so I have it caught in my finger. And I'm taking the needle up. Try not to catch any of the floss on the inside, just so it doesn't get tangled and thick later on. Okay, can you see that? I've caught the tail there, and you pull pretty tight. And I'm also going to pull that side. And now what you continue doing, holding the piece that already went in, but I'm going to put it a little bit to the right of where I was before, and I'm bringing it up again. Do you see that? And I'm wrapping it again. And you want to start with a fairly long piece of floss, longer than you would normally use for embroidery, because you're going to be going back and forth and you can't really come back in and restart it, or you don't want to restart with a new piece. And you're trying to cover it as completely, as solidly as what you can. It looks better if you do it all nice and flat the first time. And as I'm going around, I'm also catching the tail a little bit more. Okay, so I've gone around and filled up most of it, but you could see a few gaps here, and you could spread the floss out and go back in and cover over any spots that you see gaps. Two things here. One, it's going to be harder to pull the needle through because the hole's getting filled up. So it doesn't hurt to have a pair of pliers nearby to do that. The other thing too is as you go around and look for any gaps, you want to remember to save some length of floss at the end, the tail here, because you're going to stitch it onto your piece when you're done. So you definitely want to start with the longer, pretty long piece of floss at the beginning. Okay, so there is my wrapped little berry with the tail. And what I did, I made a whole bunch. So 4 large, 5 medium, and 3 of the really small ones. So we'll come back to these. I'm going to start with the leaf stitch. And as I'm working, I'm catching the tail behind it as well. So I came down from the center. I'm going to go a little bit to the side of it, come up, and go down to the point just below where I started there. Now this time I'm going to come up on the other side of it. And come down just below. So there's one leaf, and I'm just going to do all of these leaves, and I'm doing the leaves first because I'm going to do the flowers on top of it, so I'm trying to do layers. So I finished off the leaves. I wanted to do one of the flowers, the wagon wheel flower, so I am using red embroidery, 6 strands of embroidery floss, but I'm also using my thrifted ribbony yarn kind of thing. I guess it's not yarn. It is a synthetic fiber, but it's variegated and it's thin. So I'm going to use that, which I'm kind of excited about doing. So you saw these 5 armed or 5 stitches, long lines. So what you want to do, 5 long stitches that radiate out from the center. Now these should be about the same length on all of these. Obviously they're not going to be exact, but they should be close. So I cut my ribbon at about, I'm going to say 60 inches long, which I think might be way too long for what I'm going to do, but it's the first time I'm doing it on this fabric, so I'm just going to play it safe. And when you pull up the knot the first time, that's the only time you'll go through the fabric. So I went under this first line, over the second line, under the third line, over the fourth. So you're basically weaving a circle around. And with this ribbon, you kind of want to twist it a little bit or have it have some dimension as it goes around. So it'll look more like flower petals. And you don't want to pull it too tight. The main thing you want to make sure is you're doing it over and under each time you go around, because that will give it the beautiful dimension. Okay, so I'm adding a little bit there. And because this is also variegated ribbon, I can choose what color I wanted to start with. So I started with more of the red color, and then it's going to go into a pinkish color, I think. Yeah. So you could see how it's starting to wrap around itself like flower petals. For a change, you don't want it to lay too flat as it goes around. I'd even twist it a couple times. Still needs more twisting. The twisting adds a lot of texture to it and dimension. So can you see, I'm going to come in a little bit. See how it's starting to look like a rose? Certain amount of beauty to it when it's more twisted. Now I could just take it down into the back of the fabric, and what I'm going to do, this is kind of interesting, is that since I knew that I started off with 60 inches, I should be able to determine how many inches I needed for that little flower. So let me get a little closer, and I could finish another flower next. Okay, because this one's a little bit larger, I'm starting with 45 inches of ribbon. And the reason I feel it's so important to tell you how much length is that if you're working with variegated floss or ribbon in this case, you kind of don't want the color changing and having to do knots if you don't have to. So anyway, so again, I'm going over, under, over, under. This is going to be the biggest flower, so I'm going to do it very full, and it looks like I'm going to use up all the, almost all of that 45 inches of ribbon. So it's like I said, you just keep adjusting as you go. And the trick is to make sure you stitch until you can't see the lines that you stitch down to hold it in place. And some twisting of the ribbon does add interest. And now as you get to the end of your floss and you almost have all of the structure stitches hidden, you can, hopefully you had enough ribbon on your needle to just finish it off. I'm just going to finish off this floss or this ribbon right here, and then finish it just stitch downwards through the fabric. There's two flowers. Let me bring it in. Okay, there are the flowers. I finished them. I just love the way they turned out. They look so beautiful. where I have the dots, the berries are going to go. So I'm going to stitch those down. I'll probably do that last because they are so dimensional. So this branch right here and this branch right here are going to be slightly different plants. They are going to be more like this color, I think, just to add some variety. These are going to be pine branches. Okay, so I'm going to do some pine branches. So I'm going to start off by doing a split stitch with 6 strands of this dark green. So as I'm at the top here, I just want to show that the pine needles will come out at different angles and different lengths and cross over each other. Some will go up, so some will look like they're coming out sideways. And as I'm going down, I can also make them longer. So I finished all the pine needles, and what I was planning to do was this branch and this little branch here, to have it in kind of like a dull olive color, just to add some variation. It's going to be a different type of stitch. I don't want it to look like it's coming out of the pine branch, so I'm going to make it a little different. Okay. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to couch the main branch part down. So that is the main stem. Now what I'm going to do is a lazy daisy stitch. Okay, so I have my template sitting right here, and I'm starting with the largest berry, and I have the floss that was the last piece of it sticking out of the bottom. And now I'm just going to follow, you can see where the circle is. I put a dot. So all I'm going to do, besides get it in the camera, is I am going to attach it there. And I need to knot it at the bottom. So that is the piece. I need to add a little bit more of this, the twig. I'm not sure where, right here maybe? So I did a couple things to fill out the color a little bit more, but I added longer pine needles to these 3 stems, and now I'm adding one of the little branches down here to kind of balance the 3 colors, and just a little branch like that just to balance the color. I decided that I was going to add some beads to this, and I couldn't decide between these little pearls and some white glass beads. And I decided that to make the twigs, I'm going to give them beads. And I'm using white thread on my needle. I'm not going to put a whole bunch. I'm just going to put maybe 3. You see the berries here? I have everything stitched. I have the beads that look like little sparkles on the pine leaves. Now, I need to remove, you can see the blue pen, marking pen that I have. I chose this method of, or marking my fabric, because this comes off with water. Can you see that? We're not taking it out of the hoop, so you can't soak it in water, and you can't erase it like a pencil. So this was the best solution. And this is the DMC fabric marking pen. The piece is finished on all the stitching and all the beads. So now we're going to do the next step. So I have my blue marker pen, and here we're going to give it about, we're going to draw a circle, giving it a generous 1 inch inside of the outside circle. And then same thing out here. Now you could just cut it if you want. And we're going to do the same on the inside. Now, I'm just starting the cut with my little scissors. Now what we're going to have to do on the inside is we're going to have to trim some cuts here. Okay, and you flip it over. So now from the back side, we are going to do a running stitch, fairly big running stitch. I'm using regular white thread. As we're getting to this part, we can cut the top part much shorter. Okay, because this part's going to fold over, and there just isn't a need to really have a lot of fabric there. So you can pull it gently and it'll all pull in, and then you could just tie off a knot. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to pull this piece outwards. So we're going to start with this piece here. So I have a knot on my thread, and because this piece can reach over here, I'm going to start with that. So I'm pulling it outwards towards the outer fabric. So again, you're going around, but this time you're catching this inside fabric. Now, when we turn it over, for the big reveal, we have our wreath. And now what we need to do is create the felt backing, or the fabric backing for this. I have a regular size sheet of craft felt, and since I'm cutting it away and it's going to be in the background, I am just using a regular pen to draw around it. And I'm going to cut inside the line because I have I don't need it to go all the way there to the edge. Now normally, I think I would have used white felt, but I have a ton of craft felt. Okay. So what I'm going to do on the inside one is cut a little bit to the outside of the circle. Okay, so now it should fit. So what we're going to do now is stitch it down, but we're going to make sure and hide any place that the fabric is showing. You could fine-tune it a little bit. You have to be a little bit on the inside. You have to show a little bit of the white fabric because it needs something to stitch to. So I'm going to stitch that down. Okay, so I'm using a matching green thread, and I am starting at the top, and I'm hiding the knot underneath there. So trying to make sure it's straight. So I have the outer ring stitched down, and now I'm going to work on the inner ring. I have a little too much here, so I have to trim some of that back. I'm going to try to do it right now. And some of this I could stretch closed, but you want it as close as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and start stitching the inside now. So there it is, all finished. And you can see how fun it is to have the opening in the center. The back is finished off. So here's how I finished off my double hoop wreath. I tied a red ribbon onto the screw post at the top of the larger hoop. And then on the inner one, where you have that little dimple where the screw top of the smaller hoop creates a dimple in the fabric, I took a needle and some embroidery floss and looped it through from the back so it came out in front where that dimple is, and looped it onto the top of a vintage Christmas ornament and took it back around to the back. So now I have a loose hanging ornament in the center, and you could do whatever you want in there, but I had the perfect ornament to fit in there, the red and the green. So that's just one idea how to finish it off. And I want to show the rosettes at the bottom, the wagon wheel rosettes. And I do like how these branches that I wasn't so sure about, once I added the pearls, I really like how they turned out. And you can see the little sparkles, a little bit of shiny seed beads on the pine needles. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. I upload a new video every Sunday morning. So please check out my website, LyndaCreates.com. That's Linda with a Y. And you could find a lot more inspiration there. And check out my YouTube to see a lot more projects there. And I will see you in my next video.